you joining. So, the Indian Psychiatric Society West Zone Women's Psychiatric Health Subcommittee has been consistent in organizing worthwhile monthly programs, and I'm happy to be organizing this one. There's an Indian Association of Dynamic Psychiatry and WhatsApp groups like psychotherapy, which got flooded with so many members. There's another group called Psychotherapy Group 2. So these constitute a lobby of psychiatrists and students who believe that we offer only incomplete services to our patients if we don't combine psychopharmacology with psychotherapy. So to this like-minded group, I'm taking this opportunity to introduce Carl Jung and his analytical psychology, which is synonymous to depth psychology or Jungian psychoanalysis. Its important tenets vis-a-vis Freud's are that unconscious is both a repository of past personal experiences as well as universal images like archetypes and symbols, which can be a source of our creativity. Psychic energy or instincts have both a cause as well as an aim. Human psyche has many subpersonalities like ego, shadow, persona, anima, animus, self, and it is the individuation is a lifetime process which leads to the unification of these subpersonalities into a basic indivisible whole, the center of which is our soul. Our soul makes us more than a tangle of neurons and a pile of chemicals. It enables us to know ourselves and our world, to recognize what is unique and what each one of us shares with the immense totality of which we are a part. Now, soul cannot exist without its other side, which is always first found in a you. Wholeness is a combination of I and you, and these show themselves to be parts of a transcendent unity whose nature can only be grasped symbolically. So to take us through this, through what this might look like, marriage, a path to individuation and wholeness, how it would look in our lives and in our clinical practice, we have a post-Jungian master, Dr. Ashok Bedi, who is an Indian, in fact, an alumnus of BJ Medical College, who's settled in the US. He's a psychiatrist as well as a Jungian analyst, and who is accompanied by Dr. Robert Chakala, who is a Jungian therapist in California. And the program is to be chaired by Dr. Vivek Kirpekar, sir, who is professor and head at the NKP Salve Institute of Medical Sciences and Research at Nagpur. Affiliated as a PT teacher with the MUHS, has more than 35 publications to his name. He was awarded the LP Shah Oration Award in 2019. And what is relevant to today's program is that he has been formally trained in REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, at none other than the Founders Institute, the Albert Ellis Institute. And he's also formally trained in CBT. So before I hand over the mic to Kirpekar sir, I request Neenaji to welcome our dignitaries.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meenakshi. And yes, a warm welcome to all members of Indian Psychiatric Society West Zone, as well as those who have joined us across India. It is very heartening to see such a good response, despite the festival being just around the corner. And I'm very glad that the Women's Health Subcommittee took up this topic. And this came into play after we realized that our own Dr. Meenakshi Parikh has done her PhD in Jungian psychoanalysis. And I think Darpan snatched this opportunity to request her that we would also want to understand about it, because most of us have learned about Carl Jung in that first year when we would study for a short note. And yes, only collective and personal unconscious and maybe the archetypes are all that we know. But how to translate it into clinical practice, and we do see a lot of problems, especially when we come across conversion disorders or regular patients having relationship problems or communication difficulties. However much you may try to improve, either we don't have the patience to do the therapy, or we don't have the tips or the skills to guide them accordingly. So therefore we requested Dr. Manakshi, yes, to give us such an expert or a speaker who'd be able to guide us. And I think we're very fortunate enough to have Dr. Ashok Bedi here with us today. And I'm sure he is going to give us wonderful insights. And yes, the topic itself is so interesting that I would not like to take more of your time. I will now hand over to Dr. Kirpekar sir to go ahead. May I request all the other people in the audience to please mute your mute yourself, because otherwise we'll have too much of distraction. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Kirpekar sir. Yeah, Dr. Meenakshi, if he's there, I believe.
Yeah, he's right here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Meenakshi and Dr. Neena. It is a pleasure to chair this session. I believe that if psychopharmacology is the right hand of a psychiatrist, the left hand is the psychotherapy. And that is one reason I believe that every psychiatrist should know something about at least one technique or one system of psychotherapy. And with that brief introduction to why I did my training in psychotherapy, I would talk a little bit about Carl Jung, who was one of the first members of the Wednesday psychology group of Freud. And he was one of Freud's pet student. And Freud loved him so much that Freud made him the first president of International Psychoanalytic Association. Later on, because of the differences in their thinking about restricting development to childhood, which Freud staunchly believed, and Jung believed that the development continues throughout the lifetime, and one can develop till the time he dies. So Jung separated from Freudian theory and formulated his own different ways of psychotherapy, which we all know as analytical psychology and psychotherapy, or Jungian psychotherapy. And today we have one of the greatest speaker who can definitely throw a lot of light on this topic. We are mostly aware of the Freudian philosophies and the latest psychotherapies like CBT and REBT, but this is I feel that this will be a wonderful exposure to one more way, and I agree with Dr. Neena when she said that these kinds of different thinking will help in many woman-centric problems. Now, brief introduction of Dr. Bedi. He is from Ahmedabad, BJ Medical College. I belong to another BJ Medical College from Pune. He is a board certified psychiatrist. He is a member of Royal College of Psychiatrists in UK. He is a diplomat in psychological medicine at Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of England. He is a distinguished life fellow of American Psychiatric Association. He is a clinical professor in psychiatry at Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee and a training analyst at the Carl G. Jung Institute of Chicago. He is a very famous writer with some of his well-known books I would only enumerate a couple of them, like Eye of the Storm, Staying Centered in Personal and Collective Crisis, The Spiritual Paradox of Addiction, The Latent Code of Hindu Goddess Archetypes, Retire Your Family Karma, and many other books. And he is liaising with International Association for Analytical Psychology for developing Jungian training program in India and many other parts of the world. And one such center we have at Ahmedabad. And if anybody is interested in knowing more about this kind of Jungian or analytical psychology and psychotherapy, they can definitely get in touch with Dr. Parikh and get to know more about this different thinking, which we are not aware of. So I welcome you, Dr. Ashok Bedi.
Thank you very much for a very gracious introduction, and so nice to be with my peers in India. Reminds me, of course, of my homeland and wonderful memories of India. So it's a privilege to be part of this peer group. It's a big topic, so of course I will give you a bird's eye view of Jungian thought and use marriage as a template to get some basic understanding of this wonderful approach. Just a few opening remarks that may be of relevance to a psychiatric group. Of course, we are all used to a rather psychopharmacological approach, which is, of course, very prevalent in America as well. Most of the medicines are discovered in America and Europe. And so this is a Prozac revolution. We are in the post-Prozac era. Very exciting approaches: electromagnetic stimulation, ketamine therapy, the latest is psychedelic, psychopharmacology, and so forth. So it's quite exciting. However, in my experience as a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst for last 50 plus years, both in all three countries, in India, in England, and of course now in US, I found as a psychiatrist that the medications, the traditional psychiatric treatment puts the fire out, but it does not plug the gas leak in the psyche. The symptoms become shape shifters. They appear in different forms. For example, if you treat alcohol addiction, that is cured, but then patient gets food addiction. If you treat food addiction, then it becomes a smoking addiction, or a shopping addiction, or gambling, or codependence. So the underlying cause of the fire, the gas leak, has to be attended. So you need, each one of us as a psychiatrist needs some approach, some depth psychotherapeutic approach to understand where the gas leak is and how to plug it. And not only to plug it, but to use that gas leak as a source of energy and a source of vitality and a source of renewal of life, which is the Jungian approach. We don't just believe in plugging the gas leak, but to see if universe, if God has given us this energy source, the libidinal energy, it should not be managed. It should not be just suppressed. It should be expressed in a creative manner such that we can put it in service of wholeness and at the end, service of our, cultivating our personal best potentials, and then put these potentials in service of our family, our community, and of course, the larger universe, what the Easterners call the Sanatana Dharma, which is dharma which just make maximum good for maximum people. Before I continue, audio check, everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, good. All right. So now, of course, all these approaches are helpful. Cognitive behavior therapy, I did train and got a certification in that. Rational emotive therapy, wonderful, Albert Ellis, and the more later here, interpersonal psychotherapy and so forth. So all of these are wonderful approaches. However, the core approach, of course, still remains the gold standard of depth psychotherapy remains a Freudian or a Jungian approach. So main difference is, what is the difference between Freud and Jung? Well, Freud believes that our gas leak is in the sexual sphere of life, when we can't handle our sexuality, it becomes symptomatic. Either it overflows or it is repressed and becomes neurosis. And Jung did not disagree with that. He said, yes, that is one way our life energy, or what we call libidinal energy, is managed. But there are other ways it can manage. It can express itself. It can express itself in terms of spirituality, creativity, enterprise, many other ways. And all of those are relevant portals to engage that source of life energy. So that's the main difference between the two schools. Now, the Jungian approach is deeply embedded in Eastern spiritual tradition, including Hinduism, Islam, Sufi tradition, and of course the Christian tradition. So it's very close to Indian and Eastern frame of reference. So in other words, if we use Jungian approach, it's suddenly the whole archetypal or wisdom literature of East becomes available in the process of healing our patient. So I think that's a big advantage. So that's a bit of an introduction. Second piece I do want to mention, which I always do to my medical audiences, is that research has shown that psychopharmacology alone has remission rates of 40 to 45%. Psychotherapy alone has remission rates in most problems 50 to 60%. When psychopharmacology and some kind of psychodynamic psychotherapy are combined, the remission rates are 70 to 80%. That is long-term research, long-term studies, which most of you may be familiar with. Otherwise, Dr. Meenakshi Parikh will be glad to supply you with a reference or two. So that's the background, and that's why I'm interested in Jung. So let's talk about Jung and marriage in a bit. But let me first give you an overview of why we chose marriage as a subject for introduction of this very vast topic. And be sure we will have time for discussion. I won't take up all the time for my presentation. We'll leave 40, 45 minutes for a robust discussion of anything I missed or is of interest to you. So when we are born, when a child is born, and I will have a bit of a PowerPoint, so we'll go over that in a minute, but let me just give an overview first. When a child is born with all the available wisdom of the universe. And in India, we of course believe past lives, the whole thing. But even if you don't believe in past life, research has shown that each one of us in our limbic system has at least 2 million years worth of phylogenetic psyche embedded in the DNA of our limbic system. This is research that I can give you references if you're interested. A good friend of mine, Anthony Stevens in London, wrote a wonderful book. He's an evolutionary Jungian analyst called The 2 Million Year Old Self. And of course, the most recent research by the genomic research shows that our limbic system has DNA traces of over 2 million years old, and all the wisdom of our ancestors is available to each one of us to manage the problems in our life. So we are sitting on top of this wisdom, but how do we engage it? How do we harvest it? How do we get a printout of this wisdom when we are dealing with life problems? So of course, we can access that wisdom through our dreams, through our relationships, through our creative fantasy, and most importantly, for us medical types, through symptoms. Symptoms are a symbolic manifestation of unlived archetypal wisdom. That part of us which cannot be lived out becomes sort of overflows in our symptoms and in our relationship problems. So there's a whole rich plethora of a spectrum of possibilities for a Jungian analyst, how to tap into that problem as a source of sort of a wholeness rather than pathology. So we move from pathology to creativity and wholeness. That is the whole idea of Jungian thought. So it starts with childhood. The relationship with parents becomes the first matrix in which we start to get a reflection of our unlived life. Then, of course, later on, it is the relationship with siblings, That becomes a second mirror for our soul. Still later on, it is peer group in school and in college. Still later on, it is a relationship with our lover and our spouse that becomes a mirror to our soul, to our unlived life. Still later in life, in midlife and beyond, it is our impending encounter with death, which becomes sort of uh, a ultimate mirror of human consciousness. As a matter of fact, it's not how well we live, but how soulfully we die is an arbitrator of our spine, of our psychological spine. The date with death is just as precious as date with life. As a matter of fact, the second half of life is in kind of preparation for that. Of course, I will just quote one little interesting piece on that, that when this is from the Purana scriptures, King Parikshit was a sort of descendant of the Pandavas, and he was a great king, but he accidentally, while hunting, insulted a holy man, a rishi. The rishi forgave him, but the rishi's son was not so excited. So he cursed Parikshit that he will die in 7 days. Of course, Parikshit was a great king, and he made an error in insulting the holy man. And but the holy man said, "Well, you are welcome to. I will give you absolution. I will reverse my curse. My son will reverse the curse." But King Parikshit says, "No, I have earned my death, and I will live out my last 7 days with dignity and grace, and I will die." But before he dies, he goes to his own guru, his own rishi, Suka, who's the great grandson of, I think, a great Vyasa, I presume, and to get guidance on how to live the last 7 days of his life. And the whole of the Bhagavad Purana, which is 118,000 verses, is a prescription for how to live the last 7 days of your life. It is a rich psychological literature if you analyze it. So, so this is an example of how much wisdom is there for each one of us in every culture. For example, in Islamic culture, the Sufi tradition, Jung was very fond of the 18th surah of Quran, which talks about renewal of life and consciousness. He discussed that in detail in 1939 and at the Eranos conference, a wonderful treatise on how to renew your consciousness and so forth. And of course, he leaned heavily on Christian tradition as well. So all that is part of this mix. So let me now go back to our main presentation. I think I'm allowed to share. If not, people, you can activate it. Let's see, on marriage. All right, can you all see the PowerPoint? Okay. So we will talk about a marriage as a template to illustrate this whole process. So every child is born with a complete program of the original archetypal memory of the universe. Everything that is worth knowing, every child knows. During parenting, education, and civilization, we relinquish most of this memory to adjust to the world around us. Thus, the original person is trimmed, is kind of cut down to become a civilized person. But this forgotten part of our original mind strives for remembrance and embodiment in a lived life to its fullest potential. So that right there is the problem, that to become a archetypal, a cosmic person, each one of us, when we are born, we are connected to the whole an archetypal memory of the universe in our DNA. However, to become civilized, we have to keep trimming it, let go of these parts that don't fit in our present milieu. And that process of trimming helps us adjust to the outer world. But we do violence to our wholeness And the whole person, the deeper parts of us, which have been trimmed off, forgotten, repressed, are striving for embodiment. And right there is the problem. So how do we do that? What's the process? So the process is the soil of relationships. That is a primary process. While one may take many lifetimes to live out one's complete program, but we may incarnate small parts of it in rich soil of our relationships. So the soil for this, our soul to kind of living out its forgotten program, is the relationship. So it starts to blossom in relationship with parents originally, siblings, later on teachers, friends, lovers, nature, culture, and then in a Euroboric paradox, Ouroboros is a serpent biting its own tail, so it becomes a complete circle. The soul itself, when we return to the self, albeit in a conscious manner, in juxtaposition to the child who is born with full program, but without the apparatus of consciousness. So right there is the process. Now, of course, the psychoanalytic schools have put a deep microscope on each of these different aspects of relationships. For example, Freudian and Melanie Klein and others have talked a lot about relationship between parents and the infant. And I'm not going to discuss that today. At some point, I'll be glad to amplify that. The relationship with siblings, and then all the other parts of our matrix. So let's look at some of these in some detail. So the child, that's our starting point. The archetype of the divine child. What is the clinical and archetypal evidence that we are indeed born with all this wisdom? So Jung thought, and of course so do Easterners, that the child psyche is not born as a blank screen, but is endowed with this full program, this 2 million years at least of heritage. It may include memories of our past lives, and it has a template, a sort of a seed, a program for our place and purpose in this universe. It's a meaningful existence. However, we are not conscious of it. We just have this in our psyche, but we are not aware of it in our ego. So we need the mirror of relationships to get acquainted with this program over a lifetime. Now, of course, Easterners, Hindus believe it is past life karma in form of samskaras or potentials and problems that we have to attend to and transmute in this life. Now, that may be not as hooky as it sounds in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. It basically may be related to genetic transmission of our problems up from upstream from our ancestors. So all this may be medically very viable. Now, one could say, well, we have no proof for some of these things yet. But my brother is a nuclear physicist, so we talk about that in great detail all the time, that there was a famous mathematician in 1930s, contemporary of Einstein, and his name was Gödel. And a very famous Gödel's theorem, a mathematical theorem, which revolutionized modern physics. And the Gödel's theorem is that the absence of proof is not the absence of truth. So just because we don't have a proof of something yet, because we don't have the cognitive apparatus to put the template together to prove something, does not mean it is an absence of truth. And more knowledgeable you become. My brother does a lot of research on nuclear fusion, and he says more knowledgeable you become, more you go to the core of nuclear physics and quantum physics, less we know. And it is based on what you're looking for. So it's a whole different subject. But just remember, just because we don't have the proof yet for some of these things, and we are getting, with help of AI and genomics, we're getting very exciting proof for many of these, what we call speculations from the past. So where do we get information? How, if this is all true, then there must be some reference to this cosmic person in a child. And I think the best place for that, of course, I found is the stories of childhood of Krishna in Bhagavad Purana. that a child carries the blueprint of the universe and the collective psyche. So what is the story for that? I think most of you probably know this story, but some of you may not. That Krishna was a very naughty child, and he will eat dirt, and he will break the pot of all the neighbor women and eat butter. And then when he had enough, he'll share it with his friends. And when they had enough, he'll share it with the monkeys. So he was always in trouble. So after all, they all complained to his mother that this has to stop. So the mother reluctantly confronted Krishna that, look, you can't keep doing this. This is, causing trouble for us in the neighborhood. And Krishna says, no, I have not eaten this butter. And of course, you know the story. So Mother Yashoda, she confronted him to open his mouth and show him if his mouth had any butter or mud that he was eating. And Krishna warned her not to ask her to do that, but she says, no, I'm your mother and you have to follow my instruction. And he did. And of course, as you know, in the mouth of baby Krishna, mother saw the whole universe, past, present, future, and many universes. And of course, she was terrified because she now saw that she was taking care of the divine child, the Lord himself. And Krishna was compassionate. He did not want his mother to become a devotee. He wanted her to stay a mother. So he gifted her amnesia so that she'll forget the vision and become a mother again, a loving mother. So all of us have been given the gift of amnesia, because if we live out our total program, we only have two options. We either become schizophrenics because we have too much data and we can't manage it, or we become creative genius, or we become both. And I think there are many clinical examples of all. We will not have time for that today, but if you are interested in question and answer, I'll be glad to give you some information. So here is the story of Krishna showing the cosmic vision to his mother. And that divine child is each one of us. We carry that archetypal memory and wisdom in each one of us. And when we become knowledgeable of it, the challenge of a lifetime is to kind of digest it and assimilate it and transmute it and live it out in a dharmic and an individuative manner. If we don't, what is not lived becomes symptomatic, becomes symbolic. It becomes a medical or psychiatric symptom, for example. So unlived passion for God, for example, becomes passion for the spirit in the bottle. Jung's formula for addiction was spiritual contra spiritum in Latin. That means each one of us has a craving for this divine connection or the archetypal connection. But since we can't grasp it, we take a detour. We go for, instead of spirit in the universe, we get addicted to spirit in the bottle. Both of them alter our consciousness and take us to a deeper and higher place. But in addiction to the spirit in the bottle, it comes with a bargain, a deal with the devil. We have problems with addiction. So the problem for addicts is to move from addiction to alcohol to connecting with the source, spirit in the universe. That is why the 12-step program talks about higher power and so forth. So that's a whole different subject for another day. So I will just introduce you to a little bit of psychodynamic approach. We, of course, don't have time for a deep dive into it, but this original self, when it is in a relationship matrix, it sees unconsciously an opportunity to live out a little bit of the program. So we send out sort of a deintegrate for Michael Fordham, a famous Jungian child analyst in London, protege of Freud, of Jung. And of course, one of his therapists was, I would say, Anna Freud. He was analyzed by Anna Freud, actually. And he had this theory of deintegrate, that in relationships, when this self, this deeper self, has an opportunity to live out some part of the program, it sends out a satellite, it sends out a relational energy. And then in this relationship, it matures and it becomes available for us to reintegrate in our consciousness. So that was the Fordham's approach, Michael Fordham, deintegrates of the self. The second part of this equation to put the paradigm together is Heinz Kohut in Chicago, who is the father of self-psychology. And he says that the self matures in self-object matrix. We need an object, meaning relationships. So we need objects or relationships in which we can get a reflection of our unlived life. So it becomes, it's like an X-ray. The person becomes an X-ray of our deeper self. And when we see what is there, we have the potential to reintegrate in our consciousness. And Kohut says there are 3 types of self-object relationships. And we will talk about that just for a minute each. So self-object experiences are relationships that are sort of provide an X-ray of our deeper and higher potential. So that's basically a self-object. I can say much more about that, but let me just keep a simpler definition for now. So there is a mirroring self-object in which what we call mirroring transference, in that a child giver mirrors the needs and the potentials of the child, the strengths and the weaknesses, and so forth. So it becomes kind of an instrument of sort of self-reflection. And that comes from the eyes of the mother, and later on in the eyes of the father, and still later on from eyes of your lover. So these are successive mirrors that mirror back to us our deeper and higher potential. And then later on in life, with siblings and peers, and maybe even with a lover and spouse, there's a twinship self-object. Twinship is a self-object or a person who refers to the desire like other people, especially in early development. It becomes someone who's like you. And in that twinship, you have a sort of a companion. So the twins will be Arjuna and Krishna. In a way, they were twins. They were, 2 parts. Of course, Krishna was a much deeper and higher, the cosmic twin, and Arjuna was the human twin, that part of it. They're called diascoric twins, which is a different subject. These were two brothers, half brothers. They had the same mother, but one son was fathered by the king of Sparta, and the other son was fathered by Zeus, a god. So each one of us has these 2 kind of energy, a divine part of us and a human part of us. That's a Jungian, fascinating Jungian approach. Okay. So in twinship self-object, the experience of sameness or likeness serves to help us in acquiring skills and tools for our life. That's basically what I want you to remember. We won't have time to kind of deep dive into some of these descriptions. And then, of course, we have the idealizing transference, someone we look up to, who gives us a sense of calm, strength, and we feel safe in their presence. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, they talk about 4 types of relationships. If we have time, we may eyeball that at the end of our discussion. So idealized parental self-objects give us usually it is a parent, but sometimes your spouse can be that too. Sometimes we look up to our own spouse for that kind of sort of support and comfort and hold us together when we are in crises. A partner ideally should be able to step into that role temporarily. So that is not the normal marital relationship, but there are times in which a partner can become a temporary parent, particularly if you're ill or you're in crises. That role has to be fulfilled. So let's talk about marriage. That is our subject, and let me zoom in on that a little bit more. Let me know if any problem with audio or video, but I will continue otherwise. So on marriage, each marriage is a contract, but there are 2 contracts, a latent contract and a manifest contract, and that is where the problems arise. We are all aware of the manifest contract. My good friend, Dr. Jakala, I don't know if he's an audience, but he did his thesis at Pacific Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara on secrets. So the real energy is in the secret contract, not in the real contract. So what are these 2 contracts? The manifest contract in the marriage is a contract of mutuality, fidelity, and a lifelong commitment to each other until death does us part. In India, of course, we say we will be together for many lifetimes. I'm not sure that Mrs. Bedi will want to, but clearly that is the sentiment. The latent covenant, the latent contract is the much more important analytically. The latent contract is to receive, for our partners to receive, contain, and transmute our, I will explain this fancy sounding terms in a minute, is to receive, contain, and help us transmute our contrasexual archetypal projections, meaning anima or animus. But even forget that. It is basically that deeper part of us, that cosmic part of us that cannot be lived out in this life. Our hope is that our partner will be able to kind of connect with some aspects of that totality of ours and be able to help us kind of, digest them and live them out. Basically, that's the whole idea. Animus, of course, is a more specialized version of that each man has an inner feminine. We have X, XY. So we have a X X chromosome as well as a Y chromosome. So each one of us has estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, and we have to live out all those potentials. So a partner will carry those parts of us that we are not quite yet conscious of or are able to live out. And they will help us mirror those parts back to us, and hopefully we will reintroject these self-projections to enrich our ego consciousness. So that is essentially the latent covenant, latent contract of a marriage. Now, if this task is successfully accomplished, it creates a dilemma for the relationships, because in midlife, generally, of course, it's not that it always happens, but generally, the easy bits of projections are made conscious and reintrojected. So the relationship becomes less of a mirror, less of a twinship, because all that the partner can mirror has been lived out. And there starts a disappointment, because a partner cannot reflect back parts of us beyond a certain range of their own potential. So then what happens to the marriage? Well, two things can happen. Either the marriage will break down. In the West, of course, that's where the divorces take place, or people make the marriage an institutional marriage, just an arrangement, a companionship, a facade for living out a civilized life. And that may be fine. Many royal families have that kind of relationship. Or, unfortunately, one of the partners may project their unlived self-potentials onto a lover. And that is the dynamics of an affair. So many of these things happen. But the ideal outcome is that once the reflective function of your partner has been plateaued out to some kind of a higher place, then for the first time in your life, our life, we see our partner not just as a mirror to us, but as an authentic other, someone who is a divine being in their own right. And when we are not using the partner as a mirror for us, then we see them in their authenticity and their divinity. And we can be either awed by it. Wow, I never saw this person. I always thought of this person just as it's like a vessel. If you see a golden vessel which is showing you your face, you're very excited about it. But then say, well, this vessel is made of gold. What about that? And what is in that vessel? So then we become sort of intrigued by the dynamics of the real, authentic, archetypal other. And then the marriage can go to a whole different level. And that is a tall order, but possible. So that's the crossroad we talked about. When the partner cannot carry the residual life energy, then it gets projected onto a new partner, or maybe a new activity, hopefully. It's not always a new partner. You find interest in art or analysis or culture or reading something or being creative, who knows what. So it does not always have to be someone else who will reflect those back to you. But that's what analysis would do, will help you navigate these crossroads of the psyche. So ideally, in a good relationship, when we don't project on our partner as much as we did, then we experience them in their numinous or higher dimension. What we would call them the two pillars. They become two pillars of a temple that support the collective in a unique partnership. It's sort of a partnership in Sanatan Dharma, as I would call it. So it becomes a whole new paradigm for mature relationships. So in ideal relationships, when whatever we are projecting onto the other is reintegrated, then we become whole. The Shiva Shakti composite, which was split off and projected, now becomes part of us. So we achieve what I would call our Earth Narishwara consciousness, a consciousness which has integrated all the unlived, or not all, of course, that's a very tall order for many lifetimes, but most of the unlived potential that we are capable of living out in this life, in these circumstances, in this universe. So I think what initially begins as an instinct for sexuality and eros culminates in an archetypal relationship of two soulmates, not only to further the individuation of each other, but more importantly, to serve the collective, Sanatan, to serve the collective consciousness. Such partnerships become sort of partnership of two godlike beings. Tall order, of course, but anyway, I will speak just for a few more minutes and then we'll open up for discussion. So there's the Ardhanarishwara consciousness. This is an image I took in, many of you must have been there, to the Elephanta Caves near Mumbai, wonderful place of Ardhanarishwara, Shiva and Shakti. So in an ideal marriage, I think we should stop now. I have there's a blend of mirroring and twinship self-objects, but sometimes it becomes a idealizable self-object in our partner. Okay, so let me stop there. I think this is all kind of material that we can. And now we can chit chat and talk. All right. I hope I provoked some curiosity in you about some of this. And there is my good friend, Dr. Jakala. Hi. Hi, Robert.
Good morning. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
I love can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes, we can.
I think for me, because I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a Jungian psychotherapist. My issue comes with, when do I know I need to refer to a psychiatrist? But I think for the audience, we have the flip of that. And that is, how do I know when to engage therapy for the patient as opposed to medication? And I thought it would be really interesting to hear how both you, Dr. Beatty, and Dr. Parikh, how when you're with somebody, what informs you that therapy is a good thing for this person and that you're the person to do it? So I'll leave that open to, and anybody else who has, how did you make that transition? What informs you that therapy needs to be included with you?
Very good question. Thank you. I did not plan that question, but thank you for asking it. All right, I'll give you a simple example. Let's say someone comes to a physician, a family doctor, with a thyroid problem, some kind of thyroid problem, hyper or hypo. Often they zigzag between those two poles. And of course, you do a thyroid assessment. You start them on thyroid regulation medication, either thyroid suppression or thyroid, supplement, and the symptom is improved. The patient is still unhappy. These are intractable problems. They are chronic problems. They are lifelong problems. So unless you look at why does this, and which group of individuals have propensity for thyroid problems, there are two big groups, in America at least, primarily women. But the second group is the people who are disenfranchised, suppressed minorities, have much higher problem with thyroid. So I always wondered, I talked about this in a number of my books, what is the issue here? So the issue for thyroid is that from a Kundalini viewpoint, is a Vishuddha chakra problem. When we can't find our authentic voice, we can't have our own agency and authority, it becomes symptomatic and activates the voice chakra, the thyroid chakra. And that becomes what is unlived potential of finding your own voice becomes symptomatic. And then unless you address the issue of disempowerment of women or minorities or suppressed groups in a society, it will continue to be symptomatic. And that is when you start looking at that issue in some detail. And how to do it is, of course, analytically a complicated business. As they say, the most sophisticated organ in human body is not your brain, it's not your heart, but for most of us, it's our tongue. Because tongue is a soft tissue, it is a voluntary muscle, but it has no bones. It is surrounded by 32 hostile, biting, cutting, chopping, grinding neighbors, the 32 teeth. And yet the poor tongue must find its voice, authentic voice. And the only way it can do that is through diplomacy, speak in such a way that it creates a win-win situation. And that can only happen under the auspices of the archetype of the divine trickster, which is Krishna or Hermes. Krishna always managed to say things in a way that kept both sides happy, and yet he was able to put his point forward. So that would be an example. I can give you tons of medical examples, but that would be a way. But I can see there are many questions, so I will be quiet and listen to people now. Right.
Robert, I would answer your question in a different way. We manage symptoms with the help of different psychopharmacological agents. But these agents don't help us in strengthening the person so that there are no further relapses or recurrences of the same illness. And there, talking, explaining, and finding out the real reasons behind the psychopathology becomes important. And that was one reason I started studying psychotherapy after practicing psychopharmacology for almost 25 years. And I find that spending more time talking and explaining things and uncovering hidden agendas that the patient and the families have, it becomes easier that and they're happy and they maintain their improvements in their clinical conditions to a much larger percentage.
Can I please?
Yes, I just want to interject this that all of you feel free to write questions in the chat box or jump in after raising your hands. So let's go to Janki Rajgopalan, who's raised her hand since some time.
Yeah,
Janki,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am. I'm from Chennai, psychiatrist working in Chennai. So, Dr. Bedi, that was a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions regarding what happens when, we often come across this in India that there may be one partner who is more advanced. Let's say, like if we look at it from a Eastern standpoint, spiritually, let's say spiritually, they're more advanced and they're looking at their union as a whole, and things are moving forward for them, and the other partner is more less able to do that and is still projecting. So how do we know like at what point this is not going to work, and what do we advise these people? That's my first question. And the second question is, how do you manage to wear both hats, being a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist? Do you do that for the same patient at the same time, or do you do you do one at a time? And how do you choose which patient you'll do therapy for and which patient you will medicate? Thank you.
Certainly, yes. When there is a spiritual or a psychological imbalance in the two partners, one is more psychological minded, the other is less, and so forth, how do you regulate the process? I think that's your question. Here, there are a number of options. Number one, the partner who's more advanced meaning more knowledgeable about spiritual and psychological matters, it is their responsibility spiritually to not only be a lover, but also be a teacher and a guide to your partner in a way that the other person becomes sort of a spiritual assignment for us to help them claim their higher potential. And once that has been reached as best as one can, help the partner, then of course to go into the dynamics of acceptance and celebrating other parts of their relationship. But that can only happen if there is a core arrows and connectivity with the other. If it does not happen, then of course it becomes either an institutional marriage or unfortunately in the West, it becomes a divorce. That is a but I have found that if people get divorced without harvesting the full potential of a relationship, they only choose a partner who is different in shape but identical in psyche. And that is a thing that you end up meeting the same person in a different template. So that would be one thing. In terms of joint therapy and psychopharmacology, of course, as a Jungian analyst, I attract patients who are more psychological minded and interested. But there are patients who need both. If they need primarily psychopharmacological management at this time, like if they're in psychosis or acute mania, then I can treat them, of course, and I have in the past. But I think they are better treated by someone who's primarily sort of a hospitalist and so forth, because and then they can come to me for therapy if they choose to, and many do. In that case, they can either stay with their other person for meds only, and I can see them, or if they've been stabilized, I will take over the meds and therapy at the same time. However, the interesting thing I found in most of these patients who have history of bipolarity or etc., that once they start Jungian analysis, the medication issue becomes more marginalized. They may still need maintenance medication, but once you connect to the source, it has less energy, less power, and they become able to digest much of that information in a dynamic manner. So medication need becomes less and becomes less central and less of an issue. So I think it's a very dynamic, multi-dimensional process, and you have to take each in their own right. In my present case, I have 20% of clientele who is both on medication, maintenance medication, and depth psychotherapy. But because I'm a senior analyst and so forth, majority of them are now students in training analysis or and supervision and so forth. But that's purely because of what I do. But for most of us, you will have a combination of both, and it's quite fun to do that. I think we are able to this when the psyche can't digest itself. The last frontier of managing, digesting unlived psyche is a soma, physical symptoms. So that means this patient has not been able to find intermediate rest stops where they can digest their symptoms, like creativity, relationships, fantasy, and spirituality, and so you can introduce them those sort of alternatives, and it will be amazing how the even highly symptomatic patients need less medication. Some don't need the medication, but that is
I'm going to interrupt for Zabesh Rahman needs to mute themselves. Poonam, SV Jaiswal, all of you who are not speaking, please mute yourself. Thank you. Okay, please go ahead, Dr. H. What are you doing? Harvandan Kaur Bedi, please go ahead. Thank you.
to
Thank you,
unmute
ma'am.
yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Parikh, you can mute everyone except the speaker.
Can the organizers please do that? Zabesh Rahman, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Bedi. Mhm.
So there was a question and about wearing both hats together. So I think they're not two hats. They're part of the same hat. And what I feel is that if you just scrub the symptoms, like it's like just giving paracetamol and not finding the cause of the fever. So unless the cause of, it's always like, why now? And it goes to from the childhood, usually it'll begin. So I haven't gone to Beck Institute to say that I am CBT trained, but I have 35 hours of training in CBT, sir, and 18 for trauma focus, because trauma is also, childhood issues are quite important. So uh, how you know, sir, it is the history that tells you while you're taking the history. You come to know certain things, and that's how you know. And then it's not only about getting well, sir. It's not for. It's about a post breakdown, or I must say a post-traumatic growth. You don't have to just bounce back to the same level or maybe a lesser level. It would be better if you go to a better level. And obviously, medications are at a very low level when you are working like this. And the side effect profile is also lesser. And this helps in decreasing the stigma and the dropout rates. So that was one thing that came to my mind when the question of shifting the hats. I never felt like I'm shifting a hat. It's the same hat I'm wearing, maybe two parts of a hat, or which part of the hat I need when. So uh, that's my experience, and I just wanted to share, and I would like to know your views on it also.
Well, thank you for sharing. Of course, I appreciate your comment and observation. I think they are is part of the same hat. Of course, it's how much you want to engage of the totality of treatment, how much time you have and expertise you have. That's the issue. Your patients will always tell you where to put the focus on. An ideal Jungian interview, first two sessions, 90% of the time, the first session tells you everything you need to know. And I can be glad to demonstrate it to you or sometime when we meet. Everything you need to know, you pick up like a Geiger-Muller counter where the radioactive spots are in patient psyche and what you need to focus on. Jung had a process called word association test. And in a way, the first interview is like a word association test. You know the hot pockets of pathology and psychology and creativity, and all that can unfold over time if you know what you're looking for. And it's easy to learn those, of course. That's why we train people to become Jungian therapists and analysts. There is a specific methods and techniques to analyze the first session with the patient, and it tells you everything you need to know. So by looking at those hot pockets of psychodynamic activation. But that's the art, and that's what, even if you don't become Jungian analyst, if you learn those skills, even your medical treatment will be much more surgical, much more laser-like. You will focus on, as a matter of fact, when I did my training in England for a few years, one of our, school in Tavistock Clinic and in Oxford, the focus in England, as you know, is a National Health Service, and every doctor only gets 6 minutes with the patient every 3 months. That's the ideal, the amount of time. And that's the same happening in America now. So how to do this psychotherapy in 6 minutes every 3 months? And Dr. Michael Balint, who was a Jewish immigrant from Nazi Germany to London, he established a school of how to do sophisticated psychotherapy in a general practitioner's office using the 6 minute with the patient. The book is called The Doctor, the Patient, the Illness. It's a Tavistock classic by Michael Balint. So one can learn those techniques. I think, I'm sure Dr. Parikh and I can work with a group to do specialized training in such matters. But all those things are possible if you know what to surgically look for. So that's what I can say. I can say a lot more, but let me be quiet for a minute and hear other interesting questions.
So we have senior people, Dr. Dhananjay Ashtodkar, sir. If you would like to give in a comment or two, Dr. Bharat Panchal, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. It was an excellent lecture. Very nice, very nice. Thank you very much for organizing this. Thank you.
Dr. Bharat Panchal, sir. Okay. So, Kirpekar, sir, your expert comments or inputs.
I have already talked about what I feel about psychotherapy, and let us not talk about hats. We are all human beings. We have, as Dr. Bedi talked about, we have huge amount of information stored in our genome about which we are not aware. Like we don't need teaching and training for many things that we continue doing in our life. Like we see even a newborn child who's a couple of hours old starts giving appropriate smiles to mother and the carers who are near to the child, like father and grandparents. So these are things probably already imprinted in the brain. And as Dr. Bedi talked about the Puranas and the Bhagavad Purana, these are probably stories which are a kind of therapy in good old days, but somehow we have forgotten to use them. And now I think we should focus more on these kinds of storytelling which works. I have heard of Balint groups, like Dr. Bedi talked about Dr. Balint, but there are groups even in India where a group of consultants, a group of therapists, they work together on a problem presented by one of the participants in a very brief narrative and then discussed by all those who are present. And there is one major group in Bangalore that works quite regularly. And I feel that we should have more and more psychiatrists who are trained in principles of psychotherapy in different forms of psychotherapy, not necessarily one type or other. And we should get recognition for all those people who are trained in psychotherapy in our Indian Psychiatric Society as well.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have a question. Like oftentimes we get the situation where when people get married, they are very much in love with each other. And after a decade or two of marriage, one partner or the other feels the other has changed. You are no longer what you used to be. And that is the source of concern. So when such a couple comes to our clinical practice, what could be the outline of how to handle it?
Thank you for that excellent question. I think that is a very common presentation in marital counseling, that one person has grown in different, partners have grown in different ways. And there are two possibilities at that point. If there is a core attachment in that relationship, then the change in the other becomes an intrigue. It becomes a mystery, and it becomes an exploration of the mystery and harvesting of the mystery. However, if there is no core attachment, and if the one person, people grow at different rates, the vulnerable partner will be narcissistically wounded and feel that the partner is not becoming an echo. So it's a narcissist echo dynamic. as you know, the myth of Narcissus is he was loving with himself. And so no one would marry him because he loved himself more than anyone else. But then he found a nymph called Echo who did not have her own voice. She had a Vishuddha chakra problem. Her curse was she can only echo what someone else says. So whatever narcissist would say, she will say yes. You will say, what a lovely day. She'll say, yes, what a lovely day. So he found, wow, this is a ideal person for me. So if it's a marriage of narcissism, when you're just looking at the other person as a purely just a mirror, not another human being, but just an echo to you, that marriage, of course, is doomed to failure very fast. And then it deteriorates into institutional marriage, or worse, the disempowered partner may become symptomatic, will have depression, may have thyroid problems, may have diverticulitis. The whole system, the whole kundalini is activated depending on where their vulnerable spots are. And that's tragic. And of course, in countries where women are not empowered, they're difficult to break out of those bad marriages. Even in America, it's a very common problem. Then, of course, we have to rescue them. But hopefully, that's not a majority of individuals, but a minority. Most of the time, most of the people, if you do a sort of a subtle psychotherapeutic intervention, you help them become curious about the mystery of change in the other, and to join and participate in the grace of change. So I think there are many outcomes, but yes, there are things that become too toxic for a disempowered partner, and then you have to rescue them.
So it means that in order to have a reasonably good marriage, two conditions need to be fulfilled. One, that each partner must be a little bit of an individual, and two, there must be a core connection, a kind of a secure base that they
Yes.
can go back to. That secure base is there in spite of their differences and minor arguments and even major arguments, but both of them know that we can go back to the secure base, and both of them must be individual enough to be their own person, not
Right.
the eco
Absolutely.
person.
Absolutely. And so the
Thank
key is the core attachment dynamic. If there's no core attachment, then that relationship will break down. So Bowlby and others, the attachment theory of the attachment patterns is very important in assessing both partners.
Janki seems to want to ask something.
Just a quick question, Dr. Bedi. You seem to be able to relate a lot of the Indian knowledge systems with the Western knowledge systems, and not only the Hindu knowledge systems, but you're talking about the Sufi tradition and things like that. I was wondering how you were able to, integrate all of this. And in India, there are some courses on Indian knowledge systems and psychology as well. But I was wondering if there is some learning material on this.
Yes, certainly. Well, I think everyone has access to some wisdom literature. And I think which literature you have access to is basically sort of a synchronistic phenomenon. Of course, in Jungian school, emphasizes a cross-cultural emphasis, because what we don't have in our culture, the blind spot, is offered by a parallel culture. So Jung always recommended that stay true to your tradition. If you're Hindu or you're Muslim or Christian or Jew or Sikh, stay true to your tradition, but learn one other system other than your own that helps you with a three-dimensional view of human condition. Because God did not give us one eye or one ear or one hand. It gave us two for a reason, so that it helps us balance our own system. And I think that is why a secular society, which is open to different traditions and cultures, India is a very rich example of that. We have every tradition, Hindu and Sufi and Islam and Christian tradition. The Saint Thomas Christians were the first Christians in the world, not the Europeans. It was in Kerala that the Christian tradition started, Saint Thomas. And of course, Parsis and the whole thing is. I wrote an article about all this integration of different systems. In America is like that. We have people here from every culture. One street is a Muslim, a Jew, a Hindu, Palestinian, and everyone is in one street. In my street here, we have people who are black, white, brown, Chinese, more than even in India. So I think we are fortunate to be living in a rich societies in India, and of course in US. I'm blessed. Both of my great homes are such multi-traditional and open. So one must partake in that mystery and learn whatever calls you. It does not, you don't have to learn everything, but just even learning a little bit curiosity about the other system gives you, for example, one of my favorite, as a Hindu, of course, I've learned a lot of studies on Bhagavad Purana and Gita and Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and Samkhya Sutra and Vedanta, etc. But I've learned so much, of course, from Christian tradition. I was raised in St. Xavier's and so forth. But from Islam, if you read the 18th Surah of Quran, it's pure gold. If you can analyze it from a Jungian or a depth perspective. And of course, someday we could do that. But I would say every tradition offers a mirror to our soul. And if you can just learn one or two other systems, even in a superficial way, you will be surprised how much it will enrich your toolbox as a psychotherapist and as a psychiatrist.
So if there are no other questions, I'm going to ask another clinical one, sir. That oftentimes the typology of both partners is very different. One is an extreme introvert, the other an extrovert. And after a period of time, somehow the extrovert just cannot accept the introvert, cannot let go of what they cannot even dream of doing that the introvert is doing. They feel it like neglect, or they feel it like disrespect. But how can anyone do that? And for the introvert, that is a natural thing to do. So is there a kind of an outline that we can have for that couple?
Yes. Well, I think for a typological mismatch is not a problem, but actually a potential of a good marriage. Because if both were extroverts, that marriage will ending up, in disaster very fast. Any good car needs a gas pedal, but also needs, the faster the car, more strong the brake pedal should be. So in a good relationship, one partner, extrovert, is a gas pedal and the introvert is the brake pedal. And in time, the partnership has to learn to incorporate both functions. A good therapist will help the person with a brake pedal to occasionally learn not to drive with the brakes on and pump the gas pedal once in a while. And an extrovert, of course, you have to help them learn how to, in a temperate manner, tap their brakes. Otherwise, they'll end up in a disaster. So these are marriages made in archetypal heaven. And I think the role of a good therapist is to introduce to the partners the mystery of why universe has put those two persons together. Nothing is at random in the universe, in psyche. Everything is synchronistic. There's a reason. And it is a task of the good therapist to open up the partners to the mystery of why they are partners. Why did universe not choose someone else? Even in arranged marriages in India, it's not at random. There is a design. There is an unconscious determination. Because even in arranged marriages, people say, well, because 4 husbands, which one do you want? Or four partners. So you always have some element of choice. And that choice comes from psychic determination. In other words, unconsciously, we always choose the partner who is just the partner we are meant to have. And I think it is our task to open up our clients to that mystery. So if nothing else, if we can make people curious about this, I think you'll be surprised how much they start harvesting the potential of such so-called apparently mismatched relationships. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Jakala, sir, would you like to give a comment or two?
Unmute.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that it's what I found with my patients when I've encountered that in a couple is that to see the other as a teacher, that the deficit for the extrovert is sitting quiet and listening to the internal, bringing the outside in, and reverse, for the others. So sometimes it's about how do you teach, how can I learn from you how to have a little bit but of your qualities. But I think it's the difference between dating and a marriage. You're going to date that quality. It may not be something you're going to, marry to and commit to and change your complete being, but something to entertain. It's like a date night. So that, I think, is helpful to see the quality of, it's in my view, the extrovert shuts down the introvert, because the extrovert just talks and talks and talks and talks, and because they only know they have a thought or a feeling because they're saying it. It has to come out of their mouth before they know it. So, and the introvert is like, wait, that's too much for me. So I think that how to teach them how to learn from each other, the quality, it's like Dr. Beatty just said, how do I have a brake and not just a gas pedal, and vice versa?
Thank you, sir.
I
Darpan?
noticed we have a transcultural group. I see Lena has joined us from Spain and from Moscow, from St. Petersburg originally. And so she brings a very rich Russian and European perspective. Lena, did you have any comment? Unmute yourself.
Good evening to everyone, and it was a big pleasure for me to listen to such a wonderful lecture. Maybe I would comment and ask some questions just a little bit further.
Sure, thank you.
Dr. Darpan, she is the chairperson of the IPS West Zone Women's Psychological Health Subcommittee. Would you like to comment?
Yes. So as the chairperson of the IPS West Zonal Branch Women's Psychological Committee, I think that it's a very, very big honor for me to give my comments. And the topic titled Marriage, a Part to Individuation and Wholeness. So Dr. Ashok Bedi sir has conducted a very deeply insightful and a very enlightening lecture. And I think that he has mesmerized us all with his presentation, and the content of the lecture gave us a very good perspective, very true to the theme of wholeness, ranging from his examples on evolutionary sciences and bringing in a little of neuroscience perspective, and then talking about mysticism and spirituality and psychoanalysis. So I think that it has been really wonderful to listen to his lecture, and also the diverse points shared by Dr. Jakala and Dr. Elena. We welcome you as well, and thanks for sharing your comments, and the excellent Indian perspectives that were shared by Dr. Vivek Kirpekar, sir, our chairperson. So we're very grateful to both of you all. And now I'd like to thank Dr. Meenakshi Parikh ma'am, who is the advisor to the IPS Western Zonal Branch Women's Mental Health Psychological Health Subcommittee. And she's been helping us and guiding us throughout the year with her inputs. And it was that we met during the IPS midterm CME, or Western Zonal Branch. And that was the day when Madam shared that she has completed her training in psychoanalysis from Switzerland. And as we were discussing, I just shared and thought that maybe we could request her to link her psychoanalytic training and to see how women's psychological health could be connected. And then over the next few months, it's so beautiful and so wonderful that we could have this very great lecture. So I thank you very much, Dr. Meenakshi Parikh ma'am. And it's been really one of the best sessions that we've had. It's very rich, and it's we were wondering whether psychiatrists would be interested. And she was also asking that should we do it at the time when we met. And I was like, why not? And maybe not everyone would be interested amongst all psychiatrists, but definitely a good deal of, postgraduate trainees, early career psychiatrists, senior psychiatrists, all of them would definitely share some specific interest in psychotherapy. So my suggestion that Dr. Bedi and his team and Meenakshi Parikh ma'am, we'd also like you to take more leads on future webinars or any training programs that you would like to, collaborate with us. Please let us know, and we would wholeheartedly support you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we'll definitely continue this conversation, but our time today is about to get over. And so I request Dr. Abha Bang to give the formal vote of thanks. She is a very active member of IPS West Zone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. My job has already been made very easy by Darpan ma'am by already thanking you and Dr. Bedi, as well as our chairperson, Dr. Vivek Kirpekar sir, for being here and telling us the flow of events of how it happened. I'm sure to summarize what I would take away from today's webinar is the very introductory line that Dr. Bedi said, that it's not just about plugging the gas leak, but also about redirecting the energy of that gas leak and trying to find out how we can use it to better the person. And I'm really excited about the 6-minute psychotherapy sessions that he spoke about. And I hope we can organize some workshops around that. Thank you so much once again to Dr. Ashok Bedi sir for taking out time and for giving us a brief overview in whatever time we had and for such open discussions. I'm grateful to the entire audience, both within the country as well as from across the globe, who have joined us today and shared their insights. And it's always wonderful to hear from Dr. Kirpekar sir, my teacher, and an inspirational figure who still keeps learning and inspires us to learn. I'm grateful to Dr. Neena ma'am for being present here along with Dr. Dhananjay Ashturkar sir, Dr. Meenakshi Parekh ma'am, Dr. Darpan Kaur ma'am, and most importantly, the entire audience for spending your valuable time with us and enriching ourselves. I hope all of you have a great evening ahead, and good night from India to all of you, and a good morning to the people in Europe and America. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. And the link
Ma'am,
will be.
can you please share the email ID of Dr. Ashok, please?
Yeah, I'll share it in the group, or because
that's-
now it's a little late to type in the chat box. But Abha, the link will be shared tomorrow and the West Zone YouTube channel for those who want to revisit it and for friends who have missed it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so
Definitely.
much.
Thank you.
Fun.
The website to Abha, please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you everyone. Bye bye.
Bye,
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, sir.